My broker calls me in to his office and he lights me on fire. To make it right, I had to walk away from the entire commission and write an $8,000 check. Welcome, real estate agents, back to the RMG Agent Podcast. I'm your host, Reed Moore, and I'm really excited that you came back to join us. As always, for all these episodes, as well as our blog and our action guides, you can go to rmgagentpodcast.com. You can also find our free business planning webinar there. You can find us on Spotify, Google, you can find us on Apple Podcast and YouTube. And of course, if you like this and if it helps you, please let us know about that and share it with a friend. Today's episode is going to be fantastic, but first, my co-host, Jake Bartlett.
Hey guys, super excited for today. This is going to be hopefully a fun, interesting, funny episode. We're going to talk about maybe some pain that we've experienced through some bad transactions or mistakes that we made. So hopefully you don't make those same mistakes after listening to this episode. So Reed, we're talking about bloopers and blunders, or real estate bloopers and blunders specifically.
Yes.
What's one that you've made?
So over the course of my career, I've learned that making mistakes can be really costly, right? And one of the first ones that I did, it was early in my real estate career. So this is about, we'll just call it 15 years ago. And I had some friends that called me and said, "Hey, Reed, would you come list our house?" And I'm thinking, like, nailed it, right? This is out of my network, and they're, not like real good friends, but that one tier behind that. So I was like, this is great. Go over to their house, do a market analysis, all this stuff, right? Everything's great. A few days later, the husband calls me and says, "Hey, just so you know, we're actually not doing well." I'm like, okay, so what does that mean? So then we go into like marriage counseling stuff, right? And it turns out they're really, really, really not doing well. Like they're selling the house to separate. Okay. So one of the things that can happen is when people are in bad situations, sometimes they stop making payments on their house. So I asked them, like, "Hey, are you guys current on all your payments?" "Oh, yeah. Like, no problem. I'm like, "Are you sure? Like, you've made all your payments?" Yeah, no problem. Awesome. So we get into the process. They don't really have much money. And my broker at the time, who is a very aggressive, should have been a trial attorney, awesome broker, he's on the other side of this deal. And he has this young military guy who's buying the house. So the house needs new carpet, needs a bunch of things. And so because I have great sellers that have plenty of equity, who are making their payments, like he decides, hey, he's going to call in a favor to his carpet guy who will get paid out at closing. It's all going to be good. And the young guy also put some money in to do some things, and everything's going great until 3 days before closing. I get a letter from the law office in Alaska that happens to take care of all the foreclosures. Turns out they had not been paying their mortgages to the point that it had gone into pre-foreclosure status and had erased all of their equity and then some. And so my broker calls me in to his office and he lights me on fire. Just absolutely annihilates me. Because as a professional, what I should have done, right, was I should have went and verified. I should have gotten a payoff. And of course, I didn't do that. So I ended up in this situation where my clients did something. I didn't verify. This young guy is going to lose, the money he has in. My broker is going to rip me apart because of his relationship with the carpet guy. So what ended up happening is we ended up, I remember sitting there in his office getting ripped apart. And at one point I just stood up and I said, like, "No more, I will make it right." And I slammed his door and walked down the hall. So it turns out, to make it right, I had to walk away from the entire commission and write an $8,000 check. So the total amount of that, was $16,000. And it was just because this one thing that almost never matters.
Yeah. Sellers never lie to you, right? That's
oof.
Yeah. Especially in those tough situations that they're going through. Like, I don't necessarily know that it's lying, but maybe they just were embarrassed to tell you. Since
embarrassed, or they just don't know the consequences of, like, if I just keep this over here.
Yeah.
We can do this and no big deal. So that was my most expensive. Okay, so now that's mine. What about you? What's your most expensive real estate blunder?
Yeah, so one of my things that I was always excited about and was kind of my made it thing, right? Like I knew I had kind of made it and this was a good career for me when I could afford with my disposable income to buy a hot tub.
Oh yeah.
And at one point earlier in my career, a box got missed on a hot tub that was in a listing, and it was caught towards that final walkthrough or a few days before that final walkthrough, and ultimately had to pay the sellers $4,500 to leave that hot tub so that the clients that I was working for got that. Funny thing was though that it was a few years after that before I got my actual hot tub. So there was a hot tub across town at a client's house that I had paid for that I didn't ever get to use. And 2+ years later, I actually got my first hot tub, and I was, I had made it at that point.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's funny because so the great thing is that some of the weird things that happen in real estate, they don't always cost us money. Some of that's because of skill. Some of it just because we're dealing with people, and there are so many fun scenarios that come out with people. So one of the guys that works with us at RMG, I remember he was in his first couple months of real estate, and he calls me, and he has this very, very unique situation show up. Basically, there's a very special room in this house dedicated to things that look like workout equipment, but that's not actually what it's for. A whole room. And it turns out that the seller didn't live there. This person's like son-in-law did. And so the seller is actually oblivious to what they're walking through. And so I just remember when he calls me, he's like, hey, what do I do? And so I just said, okay, the first thing we do is we stop. And we just acknowledge this is what we live for. This is the best part of real estate. Just get over the embarrassment of it.
Yeah.
And anyway, he sold the house. They actually, I believe the clients, the buyers actually asked for all of the gym equipment. So it worked out really well.
They were really excited about the 50 Shades books that came
right.
out. Yeah.
That's
Okay.
exactly
Gotcha.
right. Yeah.
I followed you now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that happened to me early in my career that led to me having to double check when I would do showings. I once showed the wrong house, but confidence gets you a long ways, right?
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the exact address, but it was on the address of the house that I had made the appointment for was on like West La Crosse here in Spokane. I went to East La Crosse in an address that was fairly close, like both 700 blocks of the La Crosse streets, but like opposite sides of town. Also happened to be for sale. And I just knocked on the door, and the two adults that were there answered. I was like, hey, I'm Jake, I made an appointment. And they just both looked at each other. And we're like, did you take an appointment? Did you take an appointment? And before they could even talk to each other, I was like, yeah, I made an appointment. Like, we're just here. My clients are right here. Like, you guys could stay. I'll just show the house. Like, I just acted like everything was right.
Yeah.
The house I was supposed to be showing had 3 bedrooms. And when I got to the 4th bedroom in this house, things started to go off in my head that this was not the right, something wasn't right. And then when I got to the 5th bedroom, I knew I'd screwed up. So I just turned to my clients and was like, I think we're at the wrong house. And so let's just go ahead and leave. It wasn't going to be a house that worked for them, the one that we were currently standing in. Let's just walk out and I'll figure out what happened out in the street here. So I went back, I looked at the house address on the house, and then looked at my sheet of paper because I was still using paper back then. I think we still had to fax stuff, but it was off by a couple numbers. That's when it dawned on me, like, check east-west. And yeah, we were at the wrong house.
Nice. Yep.
We still made our other showing though.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Because the window was still good enough. We just went straight across over to the other side of town and ended up making our showing. So that would be one, a screw up that was on mine that didn't ultimately cost me any money, but it definitely made me, two things clicked in my head. confidence will get you places. Also double check before you go show houses that you're at the right house.
Well, it's interesting because, when we're talking about this, a lot of it comes down to, okay, so what are the things to do in our industry really to avoid a lot of times the costly blunders, right? One of them is, I always just think that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or like we talked about it, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of pain. And there are so many opportunities if we operate as a professional, like we've talked about before, having effective conversations and structure around the way that we work with buyers and sellers. We have the ability to communicate and over communicate, and that saves us a lot of hardship over the long haul. The other one is systems. Pretty much every time that I've had a big issue that I've had to write a check for, it's because I didn't have a system in place. I was going off of memory, or I've gotten really good at this. So it's really interesting because when you look at people who do things by checklists, like airline pilots, their ability to increase the safety of flights just by people who are professional and are awesome at what they do, like surgeons, pilots. They basically, by using a checklist and pairing that with their skill, they almost remove all of the error. It's really pretty fantastic. And so for us, because sometimes we can fall into the trap of thinking the stakes aren't as high, for our clients, a lot of times the stakes are very high, right? But systems and checklists.
Yeah, so we'll go back to that hot tub story, right? Like there were so many things that if I had had it in place, I could have caught that. Like before sending the offer to my clients to sign, double checking the included items and making sure they were all checked on there. Making sure that I talked to my clients and asking them what was important because they hadn't said anything about that hot tub. And then making sure that, before the home inspection, something had gotten checked, because I could have probably got that just added via another form. But once it got down to a few days before closing, I was stuck. Like the only way out of that to save face with the client and make things right for them was to fork out my money. And so now having the right systems, slowing down, making sure I'm methodically doing things. The ounce of prevention saves pounds of pain. Like that is the exact way of doing it, especially when you're interacting with the clients. Just be meticulous, have systems.
Well, the great thing about this is if you continue in your professionalism, right, the funny things and the bloopers still happen. So that makes what we do fun. The painful things become less and less, right? And you can't always control what's happening with your client, what your client tells you or doesn't, all of that. But it really does minimize. And what happens over the course of time is when you save enough people from really bad real estate situations because you're actually really good at what you do, that reputation sends ripples. I remember I went on a listing appointment years ago and talked to this guy. He was a great guy, and he had built his house, right? So he had subbed it out, and he had done a lot of the labor, and he had a lot of equity in it. He was estranged from his wife. They were going through a really hard time in their marriage, and they had bought the piece of land that they built the house on from his mother and father-in-law. So his mother and father-in-law owned 2 lots side by side, and they sold him this lot, but the agent that they were using didn't catch it that he actually started building on this lot. And neither did anybody else, like the city inspectors. Nobody caught that. So what happened is he had this lot that was probably at the time like a $30,000 lot, and he built a $200,000 house, and he probably had $150,000 worth of equity in the whole project. And so I went out, signed the listing agreement, went back, reached out to the title company, said, hey, I need a preliminary title report. And my title company calls and says, hey, Reed, there's something wrong here because he's not the owner of record for this piece of property. So I call him and said, hey, do your mother and father-in-law still own this piece of property? He's like, no, absolutely not. Turns out that, he had bought this one, he had built on this one, and because he was kind of at odds with the family, they said no.
So now they owned it all.
They owned it all. Ooh. Yeah. It was a really, really rough situation, right? So
did you get the listing with the mother and father?
no, I didn't. I didn't. No, I don't think they ever sold it, and it was just a bad situation. But those kind of things are very high stakes. And for our clients, sometimes if you do enough real estate, and especially if you do a lot of real estate and you don't buy and sell real estate yourself very much, you can lose empathy. And when you do that, you forget how incredibly important your professionalism is.
Yeah. Another thing I see a lot that agents do is they just throw their money at things instead of having hard conversations.
Yeah.
And as you scale and as you grow your business, the less that you can do that, the better, because it adds up. If you're doing, 8 deals a year and one of them you throw $500 at, it's not a big deal, right? Like, yeah. But if you're doing 30 deals a year and 10 of them you're throwing $1,000 at, you just lost $10,000 in your bottom line.
Sure. And I think this is a really important thing for agents to understand, and that is there are times when you mess up, you fess up, you write a check. Yeah. There are times where you realize the tension in the negotiations could lead to you simply writing a small check and having unbelievable goodwill, and it's basically marketing money.
Yeah. But
where I see most agents writing checks is that they are avoiding actual negotiations. They're avoiding hard conversations. The problem with this is a couple things. Number one is that every opportunity for you to walk through a hard conversation and help two other parties navigate it builds your skill. You fast forward 10 years and you've just always written the check. You tell yourself a story that is because, you're a great guy, you're a great gal, all that stuff. But the reality is you're actually not growing in one of the key skills that makes you an elite agent, right? And so every time you have this situation, and it's not like, oh, I can put some money in here and I will be a rock star, but you're like, I can put some money here and just make this go away. Stop and ask yourself the question, if you fast forward 5 or 10 years, because you're not thinking about this year in real estate, you're thinking about your career in real estate, what skills are you giving up? Not just for you, but what are you giving up for your future clients? Because they know that they can call you and you're the guy, you're the gal.
Yeah, and when you negotiate with somebody who hasn't taken those shortcuts that are 10 years and they're like, it, right? Like they can be great people, but when it comes down to having those conversations with them, like if you're not prepared, if you're going to just throw your money at the problem, that's what will end up happening.
Yeah.
So you have to go fight for your clients. You have to have the skills to be able to tackle that and understand that you could still be friends with the person that you're talking to, but in that moment, you have counterpoints that you're trying to come across.
I remember earlier in my career, there were a couple ladies that were on the other side of quite a few of my deals, and they were both way better than I was. And I just remember being like, hey, can we just pitch in like $250 and make this go away? And their answer was, nope.
Yeah.
And it was just like, I'm like, what do you mean no? And it wasn't because, their clients, they had raving fans. And I just remember how much I got pushed around those negotiations. And I also remember other agents being like, oh, that person's this and that and the other thing. You fast forward a few years, you grow up a little bit and you're like, no, they're actually really kind and they're really great. They're just awesome at this part of their job.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they have their client's best interest at heart, and because of it and their skill level, they get what's best for their client and they get to keep their money.
That's right. So Jake, what I really hope from this episode is I hope that we save the people that are listening, I hope that we save them money, right? Yeah. I hope to hear on Instagram and Facebook their funny stories. Yeah. I also hope to hear those stories of like, I almost did this, or I almost shortcutted this step, or I didn't follow the checklist and then I did, and to hear about them saving money and really, even earning business because of it.
Nice. Yep, that'll be awesome. Hopefully funny, and collectively we can save each other tons of money and other agents tons of money.
Yes, and we got some awesome episodes coming up. So the next 2 episodes I'm really excited about.
Yeah, so we are gonna do what's the thing that your clients are most looking for in an agent. Yeah. Trustworthiness, right? We're gonna talk
about trust you.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about how to build trust with your clients, how to gain their trust. Yep. and to be just be known as a trustworthy person within the industry, so that when somebody passes you, a referral, they know that it's because you've gained their trust. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to put a unique twist on the Sitzer Burnett case, and what that's going to mean for us, today, and kind of moving forward with what we know. Yeah. And how that's going to work.
Yeah, there's a lot that we don't know, but there's a lot that we already know, and there's some things that I think we can just help agents level up by talking about.
Well, as always, guys, hopefully this has an impact on your career, encourages you to do more, and empowers you in this season of your career.
Awesome. All right, guys, we appreciate your time. Take care. Give us a thumbs up and share.